Hey everyone, Dr. Jamara Davis Welch here. Welcome back to those who've been following me for a little while now. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. In my last video, I mentioned that we'd be talking about Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and specifically their amazing prayer that's recorded in the Septuagint. But before we get to that prayer, we need to understand who these young men were and the incredible circumstances that led to their encounter with King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, let me set the stage for you. According to the Septuagint, in the third year of King Joachim's reign, king of Judah, who is called Jehoiakim in the King James Version, Nebuchadnezzar II, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The captives were carried away to a land called Shinar. And this is what's interesting because Shinar, also known as Shinar, is the same place where the Tower of Babel was built. This is where things get really interesting. It's time for an ancient biblical geography lesson. Join me for a deep dive. Now, I'm going to show you something that might challenge what you've previously thought. Now, don't get mad. This first map is titled Estats de l'Empire du Grand. Let me stop right here. I'm just going to call it the Turks map. I do not speak French. Anyways, this map is from 1700. Notice that I've circled Iran and look at the other area that I circled, which is labeled Iraq. Now, we can confirm that this is indeed the general area of what we now call Iraq, because if you look closely, you'll see cities like Mosul and Kirkuk marked on this map. These same cities still exist today as Mosul and Kirkuk in modern Iraq. But here's what's interesting. Babylon isn't shown here at all. This is significant because nowadays we're told that ancient Babylon was located in what we call Iraq. But this map from the 1700s tells a different story. Now, let's look at this map from 1872, published by the Society for the Diffusion of Useful Knowledge in London, one of the most respected educational institutions of its time. Look carefully at this northern region of Africa. Here we see an area circled Shinar, clearly on the continent of Africa. And notice this area that we today call the Middle East over here to the right. It's shown as part of Africa also. And also take a look at Jerusalem, which is underlined. But here's where it gets really interesting. This is the same map, but I'm showing you the southern region now. Look at this. We see Jerusalem marked here too. And not just Jerusalem, we also see other significant biblical locations underlined. We see Bethany, where Lazarus was raised from the dead and where Mary anointed Yeshua's feet. Rehoboth, one of Isaac's wells, whose name means wide spaces or room enough. And Beer-Saba, which we now know as Beersheba, meaning well of the oath. This is where Abraham made his covenant with Abimelech. What's fascinating is how these locations are all clustered together in this southern region of Africa. This suggests an established pattern of biblical geography that's quite different from what we're typically shown today. On the same map, we see Jerusalem and all these significant biblical locations marked in two different regions. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What direction did Father Abraham really travel when heading for the Promised Land? I have the answer, but we'll save that important and very necessary question for a future video. Now, let me show you something that adds even more weight to what we're seeing. This is the Andreas Salarius map from 1706. And look where Babylon is located, right here on the continent of Africa, just east of the Nile River. This older map confirms what we saw with Shinar's location on the previous map. What? I know. This might really challenge what you've been taught about biblical geography, but these historical maps are telling us something important about how ancient locations were understood. And here's another thought to ponder. If Abraham journeyed from Ur of the Chaldees, which was part of Babylon, as Ur was a Chaldean city, to the Promised Land, and if Babylon was where these maps show it, how does that change our understanding of biblical migration patterns? What about the Exodus route? What about the Queen of Sheba's journey to visit Solomon? There are so many questions this opens up. And speaking of Babylon, let me share something interesting about the Chaldeans. Remember, These young men, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were being trained in all the wisdom of the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans weren't just any people. They were renowned for their incredible astronomical knowledge. They were master builders, mathematicians, and so skilled in various sciences that the very term Chaldean became synonymous with wise men or scholars. In fact, this is why Nebuchadnezzar wanted these young Hebrew men trained in Chaldean wisdom. They would be learning from some of the most advanced scholars of their time. Think about it. If these respected cartographers and scholars place these biblical locations in Africa, what else might we need to reconsider about our understanding of biblical geography and biblical people? These aren't just random maps. These are carefully preserved documents from prestigious institutions. These cartographers and scholars were working from ancient sources and knowledge that we might have forgotten or overlooked. Further, understand that what we now call the Middle East, specifically the Arabian Peninsula area, wasn't even termed that until the 1800s. In fact, the term Middle East is a geopolitical term. Before that, the Arabian Peninsula was considered part of Africa. In the 1800s, the British and other European powers began using the term in military and geopolitical context. It gained prominence in British colonial strategy concerning their control of India and the Suez Canal. The American naval strategist, Alfred Thayer Mahan, is widely credited with popularizing the term Middle East in a geopolitical sense, highlighting its strategic importance for British naval interests, particularly in relation to the Persian Gulf and South Asia. He notably used this term in his 1902 article titled The Persian Gulf and International Relations. Now, post-World War I, the term gained further traction after the Ottoman Empire's dissolution, when Western powers divided the region under mandates, further defining it as distinct from both Europe and Africa. Now, I know this information might be challenging for some of you. You might be thinking, wait a minute, this isn't what I've been taught. And that's okay. My sharing this information with you isn't to upset anyone, but to empower you to do your homework. I just want us to look at what the early believers understood and knew. Again, I'm not here to upset anybody. I'm here to encourage you to dig deeper and let the truth take you where it takes you. As Yeshua, Jesus, said, the truth shall set you free. And listen, I know when people say, do your research, it can be frustrating because you might not know where to start. As someone with a PhD, I've been trained in research methods, but I realize not everyone has this type of training. So let me give you some concrete places to begin. First, the David Rumsey map collection is an incredible resource where you can find historical maps spanning centuries. These aren't just any maps. These are preserved documents that show how our ancient ancestors understood the world. The Cambridge Digital Library is another excellent resource containing thousands of historical documents and maps. And if you're specifically interested in historical maps like the Solarius map I showed you, Michael Jennings' Original Antique Maps is another excellent resource. You can also explore academic databases like JSTOR or Google Scholar, which contains scholarly articles about ancient geography and history. The Internet Archive is another treasure trove of historical documents and books that can help you understand how these regions were viewed throughout history. Matter of fact, you can find the Persian Gulf and International Relations article there. You will see on page 39 where Alfred Thayer Mahan talks about adopting the term Middle East. Remember, good research isn't about confirming what we already believe. It's about being open to discovering what the evidence shows us. And let me share something important here. We need to be careful not to fall into the trap of thinking that just because we live in modern times that we somehow know more than our forebears. This kind of thinking isn't just dangerous, it's arrogant. You see, ancient civilizations possessed incredible knowledge and technologies that still baffle scholars today. From precise astronomical calculations to architectural marvels, from advanced maritime navigation to sophisticated medical practices, our ancestors were brilliant. And just because we're in the year 2025, according to the Gregorian calendar named after Pope Gregory VIII in 1582, which, by the way, is itself a relatively recent political construct and not the only way to measure time. Dare I say, not the correct way to measure time. I mean, who starts the year off in the dead of winter? Does that even make sense? The new year starts in the spring. The calendar itself tells you it's off. How is October the 10th month of the year? We all know that oct means 8. How is November the 11th month when we know that nov means 9? And don't let me get started on December. Last I checked, deci meant 10. But these are topics for other days, and I digress. I know I'm on a rant. Stay on track, Jamara. Stay on track. Okay, where was I? Yes, all right. So just because we're in the year 2025 doesn't mean we're automatically more advanced or knowledgeable than those who came before us. There's a saying that those who don't know history are destined to repeat it. But I'll take it a step further. Those who dismiss ancient knowledge might be missing out on profound truths that our ancestors understood perfectly well. So as you start this research journey with me, take notes, cross-reference what you find, and most importantly, above all, pray for wisdom and understanding as you study. Approach these ancient texts and historical documents with humility, knowing that they might contain wisdom we've forgotten or overlooked. Now, let's talk about these young men. The Septuagint tells us that King Nebuchadnezzar instructed his chief eunuch Ashpenaz to bring specific people from the children of Israel into captivity. But not just anyone. He wanted young men from the tribe of Judah, possibly of royal or noble blood. They had to be without blemish, beautiful in appearance, skilled in wisdom, knowledgeable, understanding science, and capable of standing in the king's palace. Think about this for a moment. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were likely teenagers of nobility, so they were from the upper echelon of society in Judah when this happened to them. They were made into eunuchs, which was a tremendous sacrifice. I can only imagine how terrifying that was for these young men. They were apparently very attractive, highly intelligent, and possessed the sophistication to stand before royalty. These weren't just random captives. They were the creme de la creme of young men. What happened next really shows their character. When they were offered the king's food and wine, which would have been considered the finest cuisine available, Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself, and his friends followed his lead. They requested to eat only vegetables or pulse, as it's called in scripture, and drink water. They were given 10 days to prove this diet wouldn't harm them. And after just 10 days, they appeared healthier and better nourished than all of the other young men who ate the royal food. Because of these results, they were allowed to continue their diet of vegetables and water for the entire 3 years of their training. And let me tell you something. This is powerful. Many believers today do what's called a Daniel fast. I'm sure you've heard of it. And they do it for 10 days and they see some amazing results in their health and clarity of mind. But can you imagine doing this for 3 years? These young men's commitment to their convictions literally transformed their bodies and their minds. Talk about being high value. It makes you wonder how much sharper and wiser we might be if we made similar commitments to clean eating and spiritual discipline. So after 3 years of education in Babylon's language and customs, when they finally went before King Nebuchadnezzar, they were found to be 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers in his realm. 10 times better. That's not just passing the test. That's exceeding all expectations. In our next video, we will dive deeper into what happened in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, that famous dream about a statue that represented different kingdoms and how these young men's faithfulness led to their promotion in Babylon. All of this sets the stage for their incredible act of courage and the powerful prayer that they prayed in the fiery furnace. But that's most likely something I'll talk about in part 3 of this series. Now, before I go, I want you to think about something. These young men stayed true to their convictions even as teenagers in a foreign land. They didn't compromise their beliefs even when faced with pressure from the most powerful kingdom of their time. That's the kind of faith that prepares you to face a fiery furnace. With that, salama and barakah, in other words, peace and blessings, and I'll see you in the next video.